Welcome to Flow360 training webinars. In this session we will be covering categorization. We've already had a look in other webinars at custom data and work types as forms of categorization. Formal categorization is somewhat different. Adding custom data, which is appropriate in many cases, is essentially free-form, and you can consider to be individual tags. And you can add any custom data labels to anything. Structured categorization that we're looking at in this session is a little bit more organized. You'll find there are inbuilt categorization schemes in Flow360 to provide a formal structure for the organization of objects and allow these objects to be located using searches even when they're dispersed across one or more locations or sites. Typically, categorization as applied to buildings and locations, say, will be used to formally categorize the space, for example, by function. So let's look at one example of doing just that. We're going to find, first of all, some corridors. And by typing in corridor, we found a number of spaces, and let us go to one of these. Categories are added to objects by going to the Details tab and then to the Categories subtab. Custom data is added on the first tab, but specific, formal, organized categories are added on the Categories tab. And to add a new category for this corridor, we're going to click on the little button here that says Add Category. And now we can select from a couple of different categorization schemes. We're going to look today at using OmniClass, which is a standardized categorization used in the building industry. So we're going to use, for this space, spaces by function. We're looking at the corridor space and we are describing the function of this space. And it is simply a circulation space. So we could just leave it at that. We could go further if we wanted to horizontal or vertical, but circulation spaces for a corridor is absolutely fine, and we'll simply click confirm. And you can see we've added here a new category to corridor 42. Now we can find objects then by those categories. So if I go to a full list view of areas, and we'll pop up the filters, and this time we'll go to the Category tab, and we know we want to search using OmniClass, spaces by function, and circulation spaces. And I'll click the Find button, and that brings us a long list. And because we started this from the areas list, we're not restricted to a single site. You can see we have multiple sites listed here, and we have a mix of corridors and stairs. And of course, from the front screen, if we use the quick search, we could have found either corridors or stairs, but we couldn't have found all of these spaces collectively by that specific categorization. So that's a very good example of where adding categories, formally structured categories, is useful for describing maybe the function or form of objects, rooms and buildings, or even outdoor areas. So let's look at adding a categorization, say, to a science lab. Let us say we'll go to a lab. Let's find a lab here. Let's take lab M17 at King's College. So we're looking at the science lab, and again we'll go to the Details tab and the Categories sub-tab, and we are going to add in a category that is quite specific about lab spaces. So let's now look at adding a categorization, quite a specific categorization, to a science lab. I'm just simply going to type in lab in my quick find, which gives me a list, and I want this one here, the ground floor, lab 1 at King's College. And if we go to lab 1 and we go to the Details tab and then the Category sub-tab, currently this space is not categorized at all. So I'm going to click the button to add a new category. And again, we'll use OmniClass here, and this time we do spaces, spaces by function. And here we have some choices. So previously we looked at circulation spaces. This time we're going to look at workspaces. And we have creative study and administrative spaces, which is correct for a science lab. And then we can go to study spaces and we can go to laboratory. So you can see now a much more precise categorization at work here. And if we click the confirm button, we can see all of those entered now as the categorization for Lab 1. And again, then we can be very specific about using a search that goes all the way down to subcategory level 3, laboratory, where we're looking for labs that have been specifically set up and categorized in that way across one or multiple locations. So that's categorization, and there are lots of different options you can explore there. Let's just have a little look in addition at adding categories to documents. So if we go, say, to documents, and let's pick up a floor plan. So we have a floor plan here for a particular location, and again we have both the custom tab and the categories sub-tab, and this time we're going to look at adding some category information to categorize this document. And again, we use OmniClass here, and this time the sub-list that we want to work with is to do with information. And this is just project information. So imagine we have a set of documents that relate to projects in general, and we can categorize this as project information. If we wanted to, we could go and be more specific than this. If it was particularly applicable to one of these subcategories, then we would add one of those, but otherwise simply leaving it at that top level is absolutely fine. So project information, and now we can use that to search for documents that have been categorized in that way. So again, if we go to the find when we're looking at the documents list, and in the find panel set up the category that we want to look for. So we want to look for documents that are information and project information. And that gives us a list of documents that have been set up and categorized in that way. So I hope that's given you a good flavour for categorization, how that works and how it differs from the free-form entry of custom data, tags and labels, and of course is quite different from the very specific work type categories that we have looked at elsewhere.